Let's see who pops in super early today. Good morning, everybody. I haven't got anybody in the chat. Hey! Hi, Steve. Hey, yourself open on the dog. Moon Ring, Jab Cap, Jake. I'll take the keep. Henry. Pale Rider. Good morning. Inspector Lovecraft. Good morning. Harlequin. What are you up to this morning, Pale Rider? Hey, Adriana. Nice to catch you online. Excuse me while I have some breakfast. Lysander. Jonathan. Don. Good morning. Robert. Cheese of the day is just some brie. Nice light brie. Family visit was very nice. Got through a lot of mead, which is why I'm not drinking any mead this morning. Judy Bear. Mark. Amigo. Morning, Mai. Christopher. Is it possible for me to make a video about the Rashimi people? Possibly. I'd like to restrict that to more regional videos. But the Rashimen are very interesting. I will probably make a video about Hell Ruins before I make a video about the Rashimi, though. Lysander. How's everybody in the States today? What new craziness have I not missed yet? Have I not caught up with yet? Caught you in the middle of Rogue Trader. Nice. Oh, nice one, Power Rider. I wish I could, like, see what painting you're working on. Do I have a regular DM? No, I do not. I'm not playing in any games right now. Isn't that criminal? I haven't made a video specifically about Cormier. I've made a video about Candlekeep and that region of the Sword Coast specifically, up to the border of Arm and to the border of Baldur's Gate. But I didn't get that good of a response for the video. So I'm probably just going to do a flying overview of all the different parts of Faerun and what I know about them, just like real quick. I did, Pale Rotor. Thank you very much. Yes. Yep, I got all the stuff. Crazy enough. Yeah, Canada's fine. Canada's fine. Yeah, Zazek. Yeah, catching a lot of new people. You're not late at all, Comics Nut. I've just started. Maple syrup. Well, I'm itching to run a game, actually, so yeah, I don't know. I'll probably run a game at some point. What do I hey Key. What do I think is the broest race society in the realms? Probably the Goliath. Beholder fruit. What is a beholder fruit? Yeah, as the dragonflies. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it would be the view would be panning over the Forgotten Realms as bits pop up, and I talk about the specific people and features and things. Just a broad overview, so that somebody who watches that goes, "Oh, okay, I know what's going on in these different places now." Generally speaking. Would it be possible to do a video on Camazotz, the Bat Demon Lord? He seems quite interesting. I haven't actually heard of him yet, or until now. I suppose so. You've missed too much cheese. Oh. What do I think of would Simic hybrids can work in any world where there's magical experimentation, I think. So you could have them in, pop up as a problem in Waterdeep, for instance, or Thay. This week's videos, I've got a script here which was written by my best buddy Ian, Red NZ Blue, and it's on the Orc Gates, just because this was a hot topic on Facebook, people talking about Orc Gates. Also, I'm thinking about doing a review of Ancestry and Culture, an alternative to race in 5e. This is the book here. It's got good points and bad points, this book, and I won't pull any punches. Actually, I'll tell you a little bit about it right now. This bit here, these first 2 pages is a lecture on politics, essentially, why this book exists. This next bit here, actually it's the first 3 pages. This next bit here, which is roughly, if you take away the character portraits here, full page character portraits, up to, where is it? Here. These pages, about 8 or 9 pages, is essentially all of the information in this book. The rest of this is all an adventure. So it's essentially an adventure module with a little bit of relevant information in the front here. Now, it could be argued that the $15 that you pay for this book and this amount of actual information that is useful for your game that's not an adventure is a rip-off. However, and it could have easily been done as a PDF on Drive-Thru RPG or whatever, and that the people who were doing this were kind of capitalizing on the politics du jour. However, the artwork and quality and stuff, I haven't actually read through all the adventure yet, but the artwork alone in here is really worth it. And the useful bit of information is highly useful, and I think is a really good way forward for the game. I would urge Wizards of the Coast to seriously look at this. And I do actually recommend picking it up. And if I ever do produce a book of my own, which I will, I'm probably going to get in contact with those artists, particularly Talon. The other thing that I've been doing is printing out. I bought all of the Codex books of the Infinite Planes that are available so far, and I've been printing them out and am going to be binding them into one big codex for myself, because these are really, really excellent. These are all by, hang on, you can get these on the DM's Guild. They are all written and designed by Weird Dave Coulson, with interior art by Jess Shields, Emmanuel Bo Raldan, published by One Man Studio. DE? Where is that? Is that DE? Denmark? I don't know. And www.critical/critical-hit.biz. These are excellent. So well worth picking up those. They're only like a couple of bucks each. Thanks, Robert. I read the Candlekeep section in Descent into Avernus, and if 4 mages and an archmage are the response to a small group of adventurers, then I feel sorry for the invading army that attacks Candlekeep. Yeah, it would be extremely unwise to attack Candlekeep, not only because they have a massive dragon spirit that lives in the dungeon, the sub-basement, I should say. So yeah, that would be a bad idea. Howdy, Alexander. Yes, I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who'd be interested in playing in a game with me as Dungeon Master, but I'm more of a slapstick DM, honestly. I don't play very serious games quite often. Like, my style of DMing is not exactly my style of making a video. That is a good question, Sarah. What determines if a monster has a soul or not? So for instance, the best example of that I can think of is genies, and dragons, right? So elementals are an energy being, an energy form, like a spirit. And dragons don't necessarily have a soul; they have a spirit, an elemental spirit. So their energistic elemental nature is core to their psyche and their being. So they can spend centuries sleeping and just sort of building elemental power. When they breathe out their breath weapon, it's almost like a divine essence coming out of them, and they have meta magic feats and things like that allow them to manipulate and even bring their breath weapon to a semblance of life. Elementals have the ability to inhabit and manipulate inanimate matter and manipulate it with a mental and spiritual energy that they infuse into it to turn it into their body, or to, like in the case of genies, to do whatever they want with it, to move things around freely with their will. So they have a lot of innate magic, as you would say. So dragons, when they get to the end of their life, they have a choice of diffusing their elemental essence, kind of like a force essence, like, you know, when Yoda sort of dissolves into nothing and he becomes a force, a being who's fused with the weave of the force, you could say. Dragons are like that, so they can actually diffuse into the environment and create like a permanent storm in the case of a blue dragon. Yeah. Some creatures like storm giants, for instance, have the ability to do that as well if they infuse themselves with a whole heap of elemental energy. You could argue that Genasi have the ability to do that as well. So their soul is bound up with that, so they become an elemental. Demons also don't have a soul per se, they have that essence as well. So it's a different type of being. And any creature that sort of is born by a biological process and dies and decays and has a soul and can go on to an afterlife per se. Hail yup yup. So I hope that answers our question, or a part of that question. No, I haven't done any videos on the Blight Spawned. Yeah, I'm a very much, I agree, Alexander. I'm a sandboxy sort of DM that runs convolutions and mysteries and relationships and essentially slapsticking, and the adventure evolves as the player characters do what they want in the environment. I run a lot of plots that bounce off NPCs, essentially. And I pay very close attention to what the player characters are and their backgrounds and their motivations, and I structure the adventure so that they accomplish their goals or chase after their goals. So there's a good chance, even in a reasonably short adventure, that there's going to be a lot of player character development. And I don't shy away from self-inflicted TPKs either. Yeah, I'm not saying that the meta breath feats are balanced by any, but dragons are supposed to be pretty OP. Oh, you playing Planescape? Nice. Yeah, I've got a lot of homemade sort of books. Like one of my favourite is the Librum of Magical Effects. Just want to give a shout out to. Are there any popular music troupes in Toril or tropes? I don't know. Hey, thanks, Sanchgate. What happens to that energy if the dragon is killed? Sometimes they explode. So the dragon's energy can be released all of a sudden, or they can just sort of dissipate, or very slowly. Yeah. So, yeah, shout out to Power Rider and Treasure Trove 2, a new system for swords and more. Oriental Adventures, Okumo, the Spirit Warrior adventure, and Hardware Handbook for DC Heroes role-playing game. Really cool. And a couple of character sheets. Old school character sheets. Very nice. That will sit sealed away in my collection. I'll sleep on them like a dragon. Troops or bands? Oh, well, that'd be bardic bands and bardic schools. So you can have mobile bardic schools, for instance, that actually travel from place to place, like a cirque or circus. But for the most part, bardic schools are they have a central sort of concert hall, and then they've got lots of lecture theatres and then chambers off those that are sort of soundproofed. Usually they're subterranean or something like that. This is if they're building a big place. They occasionally put on public performances, but mostly it's teaching people the fundamentals of magic, constructing and selling instruments, and going out and basically going to teach other people instruments. And bardic schools teach a lot of different instruments. They have a broad range of instruments that they teach different bards. So although your bard player character will have one specific instrument that they probably play a great range of instruments from their training. And with bardic traditions of, like, particularly elven singing, elves have that ability to use subvocal chords to make different notes, so they can sing two different lines of like tunes at the same time. It's quite impressive. Thanks, Nico. Hope I didn't miss the answer earlier. Is it possible for me to have a tiefling character like in 3.5 where he's from grass bloodline, or do they have to be a devil descended? No, they can absolutely be other planar origins as well. Technically, you're crossing the lines between Cambion and Tiefling, but I think anything that's not that's of a bloodline of a supernatural being like that could be a Tiefling. Cambions are more like half dragons as opposed to a Tiefling, which is like a dragonborn. Like, so, you can be from the line of Grast, for instance. One example is if your character comes from Narfell or Damara or Impeltur or something like that, you can certainly have a demon origin in your backstory. So demon blood in there, because Narfell had a long line of rulership that was heavily influenced by the supernatural. So that bloodline can go back like 1,000 years. So for sure, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't really have to change that much on paper, but the backstory really informs your character quite a lot. So we know oozes, undeads, and constructs don't have a soul. What about beholders, devils, and animals? Beholders, I think, have a soul. Devils definitely have a soul. Animals have a soul. Constructs, you could argue, are invested with a soul for the most part. That's why they have that symbol. Oozes probably not. Some undead have a soul and some don't. Like, for instance, a wight has a soul, whereas a zombie does not. Hey, you're welcome, Alexander. Yeah, elves are cool. Do you know anything about Nagpas? Yeah, I think I've got a video that talks about Nagpas. The Nagpa, they're essentially Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. They came out just after the Dark Crystal, pretty much. They are directly based on the Dark Crystal Skeksis. Skeksis. And they are intimately tied up with the original lore of the Raven Queen. What are some popular cheeses in the realms? Well, there's the Cataplebis death cheese. There's most regions have cheeses or different types of cheese. Probably one of the most common cheeses would be goat and rothe cheese, I think. And I don't know how common domesticated type of dairy cows are over in Faerun. But rothe are probably quite popular because there's mountains everywhere in the Forgotten Realms. Far more mountain ranges in the Forgotten Realms than, say, the continental United States. So rothe are like yaks, right? So they fit really well in mountainous environments. How do you avoid turning your campaign into a bunch of murder hobos? So first of all, keep an eye on the players making characters that don't have any background tie-in with the world. Avoid that for the first part. That's absolutely essential, is that the characters have a backstory, NPCs they know, family and guild and obligations and lords and friends and relatives that tie them into that game world. So if you allow them to put essentially a fighter or a wizard or something like that has no roots in the world and has no invested interest in it, nothing to lose, then that's a murder hobo. So they're detached, they wander. So it's perfectly fine to wander around, but your wizard has trained somewhere and has a reputation, has rivals, has people that look up to them, has masters and things who are watching their progress carefully. They have the attention of local lords and things like that because they keep track of who can cast spells. In case of emergency, they want to know people who are able to cast spells on a regular basis. Same thing with fighters and things like that. They're a valuable resource for a noble or a potential threat. Second is give them something to spend their gold on, and I highly recommend Matt Colville's Strongholds and Followers book because it gives you a solid background on building up your regional influence and something to spend your gold on. Essentially spend gold to construct a keep or something like that, which gives you real in-game benefits as a character. So yeah, give them a background and give them something to build on, and give them rivals and things like that that actually can hamper their progress or aid their progress greatly in the game. So it really makes sense for them to, games should be really hard if you don't have allies, and really boring if you don't have enemies. Skeksis from the Dark Crystal. It's Skeksis. Skeksis. Steaks. Yeah, that's it perfectly, Jam. Morning, Dyke Strider. Living spells, I suppose, could have souls. Yeah, sure. Storyhook aiding a wraith slay the necromancer that desecrated the wraith's corpse by turning it into a zombie. Yeah. Turning into a zombie wouldn't really be a punishment, though, because that doesn't really trap your soul there, but trapping them in their body as a Death Knight or a wight, that would be torturous, because whites are walking around in a corpse. It's not pleasant. Same thing with a revenant. A revenant is like a white. Do myconids make cheeses on contact? I don't think yeast is the same sort of thing, but I suppose so. You could do. What's the difference between... Thanks, Kick-Ass Duke. What's the difference between a spirit and a soul? Also, did you see my forum link on the 3,000-year-old blue dragon? For you bards, see Algal the Bard on YouTube. Yes. Spirits and souls. So souls go on to the outer planes, the astral sea and the outer planes. That's where souls go, right? Souls have an origin in the outer planes, and they come down into the mundane material world or into the outer planes as innate beings that live there. And they go back there when they die through channels, existing channels. Souls have the potential to be divine, sparks, or parts of gods, or become incarnate as gods. They have that potential. So they have huge amounts of potential. That's why they're so valuable. They have potential to release untold amounts of willpower in the multiverse. Spirits are elemental, so they're generally from the lower planes. In the context of what I'm talking about with elemental stuff. Or, like, for instance, demons are part of the lower planes as well. They tried to put them in the upper planes and corrupt the sort of soul hierarchy of the multiverse, but it didn't work. And so they became part of the lower planes and got tied up with elementals and elemental souls. So the difference between a soul and a spirit is spirits can merge together and combine and create a much larger being that's a combination of all that spiritual energy. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily compact and one thing only with distinct boundaries, and it can never combine with one other thing. Like if you mesh all those souls together, they can become insane. Spirits, on the other hand, can be meshed together and just become a flow, like a dream where they're all together, sort of thing. So you can have a combination of all that elemental spiritual energy becomes an elemental lord, and then if that elemental lord gets broken up into all that different energy, those different bits of energy can become individual elementals. So yeah, it's a different sort of system. It's like divine magic versus arcane magic is the same but different. I hope that is somewhat clearer. Thanks, the Koryugan. Nice logo. Yeah, you could certainly have retired NPCs that hunt down murder hobos because they're disrupting the local, economy and stuff like that, or they're a threat to their rule. Like nobles, for instance, can get really uppity about the potential for a band of adventurers to be able to take out their hired forces and things like that. Like if adventurers become too powerful, they actually threaten the local lords, and the local lords can do things like try and murder them in their sleep, or blackmail them or something like that, or have them imprisoned on false charges. Thanks, Jeremiah. How do you deal with players that commit lots of arson? Have them arrested. Have an arc wizard show up and say, oh, well, the local king basically gave me a spell book that I was looking for in order for me to imprison you in an outer plane. Here you go. You're gone. They're in another plane of existence. All of a sudden, their adventure as they knew it is gone. All their possessions are gone. And they're now wandering around naked in Gehenna. It's like, oops. I guess there was consequences. There's more powerful things than player characters in the world, for sure. Thanks, Nico. Trouble I'm having is lore-wise. For the players I made in 3.5 was a tiefling, but looks nothing like the typical red-skinned tieflings of 4E and in 5E books most seem like in 4E. Like 3.5 and 2nd edition tieflings were quite different from the current tieflings as they were established in 4th edition in the artwork. So, for instance, they had like fawn legs. If you look at the Planescape books and the tieflings there, generally they look more like pucks or satyrs than they do like devilish type things. So there's a lot more variability in what tieflings looked like. So some of them had, traits that looked a lot like their parent line sort of thing. And there's nothing wrong with that mechanically. Just don't give them the ability to breathe fire or a prehensile tail or wings or stuff like that unless they're like high level and they've sort of worked for it. Like they give up some feats or something, or they give up their attribute bonus and feat for a racial feat that enhances their sort of infernal bloodline. Thanks, Aiden. Hey, I'm making a homebrew world and I was wondering how many pages I should write on each topic: general history, faith, major factions, current problems, and how the races relate to this world before they get bored and stop. Oh, okay. Write everything that's in your head down on paper and then cut out as much of it as you can without it losing the kernel of what you're trying to say. Your voice will be preserved in there no matter how much you cut out. It's still you talking, but you want to cut it down to as few words as possible to convey as much information as you can in as plain a way that you just normally speak to other people on paper. So one of the best ways to do is talk out loud while you're writing, and that will both cement your sentence structure and make it sound like, if you're talking and you put that down on paper, that's proper sentence structure. Like the sentence stops and has a comma where you take a breath and pause and carry on. Or when you switch from one topic to another, it's another paragraph sort of thing. So, yeah. But essentially put everything down that you can think of that's interesting and useful. And avoid stuff which is just going on. So if you can condense it down into a timeline, then do so. If you can put it into a chart or table, then do so. Otherwise, it's descriptions of stuff which you would convey to other players. So what does this general vibe, what does this place look like? What does it smell like? What's the popular food and stuff that the character would get on the street? Keep it street level and down to what the player characters experience, and then have sort of boxes of greater lore that applies to everything, that sort of tinges everything. Like, what's the current religious feel of the place? What's a conflict that they could potentially get involved in if they're here and now doing this? So keep it alive and related to the player characters and their activities is the main thing, I think. It's very easy to get involved in DMing and world building for its own sake, and you lose track of what's actually relevant to the player characters can be condensed down into 3 little sound bites that just establish something in their heads. So keep it visual, keep it visceral, and keep it succinct. Mr. Sai, it's no point saying, could you look at my other comment? It's easier just to repost the comment so I can see it when it pops up, because otherwise I have to go searching back and I'll miss everybody else's stuff. Hi, AJ. Hi, Frederick. Hey, Matt Nerdy. You've been playing 40 years and you still don't know what a murder hobo is. It's a player character that has no ties or connections with anything and just kills every NPC they come across because they don't see any repercussions for what they're doing. So they just kill and loot anything that they come across, and they can be a real pain in the ass because they really destroy any leads into adventures and things like that. So this is typical of your young teenager who's just playing the game to kill stuff and take loot and buy bigger stuff to kill more stuff, and that's all the nuance to the game they really see. Some people never grow out of that, and that's fine. You can run games like that, like barroom brawls or murder dungeons or things like that, but otherwise, yeah, it can be really annoying. Hi, thanks, Dancescape. How do you influence people to think with their head and not just swords and damage and spells? Give them puzzles, man. Give them stuff that they can't solve with a spell or a sword. Like, what do they have to collect to open this thing? What components do they need to complete the ritual to get them out or into a situation? Who do they need to talk to? Who is lying to them? Who is trying to mislead them? You know, things like that, where they need to figure it out. So puzzles are a major element of stories, because they give they take it outside of the player's sort of hands and give it to out of the character's hands and give it to the player and say, look, can you figure out what this puzzle is? Oh, that's a good question. Where would you put the worlds from Miyazaki's films like Spirit Away or Howl's Moving Castle or Castle in the Sky and the Feywild or the Domains of Dread? Probably the Feywild, like particularly with Howl's Moving Castle. That's clearly Feywild type activity, because the Feywild can incur and move across the landscape. It's mobile. It's a dream. It's a fairy tale that's moving, and you step into it and become involved, and all of a sudden you're crossing physical boundaries and things like that into weirdness, which is that you're stepped into fairy tale. The Domains of Dread are places that you get trapped in because they are the prisons for evil overlords. Essentially, they create a domain and imprison them there for the dark powers' amusement. So you're like in the spider's lair sort of thing. Thanks, Garth. I'm waiting for your comments, Si. The Wraith's corpse was turned into a zombie by the Necromancer, and the Wraith is quite miffed about it. Right. Well, there's nothing stopping the Wraith from going into that corpse and inhabiting it and turning it into a wight. Like, why not? How cool would that be? A Wraith a spirit that can leave its corpse, and the corpse just wanders around because it's animated on its own right, but the Wraith will occasionally inhabit the zombie. How tricky would that be to figure out that the zombie is actually doing intelligent things? Hey, there we go. AJ, what do you think about my concept of what I call sweet dwarf or glutton dwarf? It's a dwarf subspecies that were created to expand the dwarven culinary world. I have no idea. Adult silver dragons in my campaign fought a kraken to save the players, got their bones broken and wings ripped out. How fast do dragon bones heal, and how much should she be freaking out? So imagine that the silver dragon, different dragons have elemental energy attached to them. So silver dragons have cold attached to them. So they would go to an Arctic region and heal by sort of resting in a glacier for a while and absorb elemental power to help boost their ability to heal. And also they probably need their treasure pile to help them heal and rest as well. They need to sleep for a long period of time. In the folklore, that's generally what they do. They may continue to have, problems like they can't fly unassisted for quite a long time without magical items to help them do so, or spells and things like that. So yeah, particularly something really severe like having a wing ripped out, they may never recover from that. But they are just as able to be healed by magical divine power as any other creature. And there are dragon gods, things like that. So there is the possibility of dragon clerical magic. The key with playing characters that are smarter or more observant than you is basically let the DM tell you things that you can't figure out for yourself. Like for instance, if you're playing a character with a very high wisdom or charisma, essentially the NPCs will respond to that character more than they will to anybody else in the party. Like they're drawn magnetically to that person's charisma, even though the player isn't really doing anything extraordinary, the NPCs will be reacting and following that person's lead, that character's lead, because their high charisma and wisdom shines through and gives them leadership qualities. High intelligence allows them to wisdom allows them to see more things in the environment. So their passive perception allows them to be the one that the DM tells them that they spot stuff all the time. So I recommend that you have everybody's ability scores written down so that you know that the strongest character can do things physically without having to roll for it. It's just like, oh yeah, Thorag pushes the door open, no problem. You hear the wood splinters as he pushes through the weak lock. He doesn't even need to roll for it. And Questor the ranger can see that there's broken twigs and the path goes this way without having to roll for it and things like that. And you can also give those characters the ability to make passive checks, like, can I roll intelligence to solve this? It's like, yeah, you can, because your character is more intelligent than you are. So let the dice occasionally do the work for you. Thanks, Jonathan. About to have my players attend a festival with games and events to follow them to allow them to use more skills. Any recommendations that I should add? Oh yeah, I mentioned a adventure not so long ago that had some stuff in there about that. It was like a pirate nautical type adventure where you go to an island and there's a festival going on there. So think of all the different games and stuff that you have at carnivals and fairs, and think about like outlandish sort of things that would be local to that environment, like dealing with a particular type of creature that's not necessarily lethal but really interesting, or local traditions and things that just sort of make sense for that environment, like cliff climbing, or jumping from tree to tree, or jumping over top of giant non-leaping spiders, or stuff like that. Yeah, and give them weird and interesting boons and gifts and things, and particularly community-based gifts that, like, they get the key to the city, or they get a book of knowledge, or they get a magical map that will show them the location to some fabulous treasure. No problem, Key. Hi, the occupants. Nice to catch you live, yeah. How petulant would a young character with 20 wisdom be? Petulant? That would be like a natural Sherlock Holmes type character. Like, they're just really, really observant of their environment. And they just pick up on stuff. Like, even if they're really stupid, they would just notice everything going on. So they'd be able to make minute observations. Like, they'd be able to smell the coffee and know exactly when the coffee was made, like down to the minute. They would be able to tell whether the person was left-handed or right-handed who drank from a cup by smudges on the rim and things like that. They would know by the location that it was placed on the table how big the person was by how long their arm reach was, for instance. Really nuanced stuff like that. With a wisdom of 20, you can pick up stuff like Sherlock Holmes. You get me? So obviously, when somebody has got that level of environmental awareness, people around them will notice and they will pay more attention to what that person is doing. So it will almost be like a boost to their charisma, because that person will just know stuff that will give everyone leads on what to do. So they will turn to that person because that person will have answers that the other people around them were not aware of. Like, they're just, oh, what's going on? And this person's like, oh, well, the cart tracks have gone in that direction. So they've obviously gone west about, judging by how fast the water is going in this cart track, 15 minutes ago. So I don't know how fast a horse goes, but, shouldn't be too hard to catch them up, and everybody's suddenly around that character and they've made a posse and they're going off in that direction. So they have leadership qualities. You know what I mean? Thanks so much for all you do, AJ. Good to see you live. How do you feel about dull-witted Rocks becoming thralls for a planescape mind flayer. I'm sure I've seen this question before. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing stopping high intelligent creatures from manipulating dull-witted ones, no matter where they come from. Rocks are particularly dangerous to deal with because mind flayers are intelligent enough to know that demonic energy leaches out into the environment and can actually disrupt and cause all sorts of problems. But they're also smart enough to harness that ability to manipulate and use it as an energy source, particularly to mutate living creatures and things like that, or even invest it into inanimate objects, for instance. But it would be a very ballsy mind flayer to try and do that. And also, don't forget that mind flayers aren't independent, they work for the Elder Brain. So what you're really talking about is, would the Elder Brain allow that sort of activity to go on? And the answer would be, yeah, sure. I haven't seen Dungeon Dad's new video, no. Just made half a crime sense. Yeah, exactly. Hey, JC Pickett. Yeah, sniff sniff, this bat guy was fresh, was used to make a fireball on Tuesday. Yeah, sure. That's what I'm talking about. You guys get it. Yeah, wisdom is really good. Like, intelligence is all about your book learning and stuff like that. So having a character with a high level of intelligence gives them a Google-like knowledge of places, locations, things they've heard, names they've heard, snippets of conversation that they've overheard and remember. It's their memory and their learning and their... so a person with a high wisdom may be able to tell everything that's going on in a situation, but if they don't have a high intelligence, they're not going to be able to tell how that connects to the wider world. They'll just know what's going on around them right now. So wisdom gives you a very high immediate survival ability, but it doesn't, like, if you don't know where rain comes from, then there's only so much you're going to be able to do about, like, observing rain droplets. Like, if you don't know how water works, because you haven't read about water, nobody's ever taught you about water, you're only going to have a snippet of the information. So high intelligence and high wisdom inform each other really well. The mental traits work together perfectly, obviously. But you can have one without the other. A person who has got a very high intelligence but a very low wisdom has got their nose in the book and no application of how to, like, they're the typical, myopic, not be able to see things around them sort of stuff. It's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. I've read in this about this lizard, and then the lizard, like, bites their finger. It's like, oh, I wasn't aware that this lizard was highly annoyed with me right now. I'm prodding the thing. It's like, oh, well, I've only got 5 minutes to live. Yes, no, I did. That's called shit. I went and had a look at it, and I wrote. I was going to write down the name. I think it's like Battle System. Jesse, if you can hook me up on Facebook Messenger or send me an email to adforemperor@gmail.com. I will give you the specific detailed information about where to find that. Okay. I don't know if there's a Far Realm Dragon. Nothing official anyway. There might be an article from a Dragon magazine for sure. Yeah, you can tell how fast a horse is from the spacing between the tracks. But if you've never learned about a horse, you might not know that, like what the different gallop and stuff like that. Like if you're just looking at a track and you have no idea, you've never seen that track before. You've seen the track before, but you've never read about what animal makes that track. Combination of the two. Thanks, Gearcast. Good night, Mr. Sai. Sorry I didn't answer your question, but I couldn't track it, unfortunately. Put a comment in the video down below, and I'll answer it there. I have an idea. to have a city inside a valley between two mountain ranges. Atop each are a blue and the other a silver dragon. What's a good point to get the PCs caught between the dragons' interests? Well, I mean, the dragons may have a reasonably friendly rivalry. Like they both enjoy flying, so maybe they have they pick up the player characters and use them like a ball in a game that they're playing. So the characters spend a good 20 minutes falling to their death, only to be caught at the last minute by a dragon who's laughing its ass off. Or they maybe set up like a pawns in a game between the two, essentially. So the silver dragon has gives them a stirring challenge to like go on a quest, and the quest is actually set up by the blue dragon to wager against the silver dragon for whatever the player characters have on them. You know, that sort of thing. Or they may essentially be trying to manipulate the player characters to get something that the dragons can't get because they can't like fit into a space or something like that. Or I don't know, you know. So set it up so that there's a rivalry between the two, which involves the player characters in something like they're gods, capricious gods who are manipulating the fates of these lesser creatures, you know. The silver dragon will maybe drop hints if it can, and the blue dragon will occasionally strong arm them, you know, motivate them if they can. Are there rain gods in the Forgotten Realms? So rain would be part of their portfolio of storm god, for instance, or even a god of fertility. So Suni could cover rain, for instance. And Sylvanas and even Talos, Stormlord. Dragon Yeet, yeah. Yeet. Ah! I love that idea. Screw's Neck. Do you know where you can learn of Drow high magic? How it differs from normal high magic? I heard they need to do bloody sacrifice, but how many? What crazy powerful shit can they do? So a lot of their magic has got to do with their the institutions that they learn their magic in. They've got a highly hierarchical and closed society where if they want to do anything personal, they have to do it on the down low. So they go sneaking out of the city to go and do it somewhere else. If they take slaves and stuff to perform sacrifices, that's going to be noticed. There's a lot of intrigue involved in what the Drow different houses and families do. Some of the families have different abilities. So they may be innately psionic, for instance, like one of the families of the Drow. And there's nothing stopping them from discovering caches of like ancient knowledge that may be really, really dangerous, like ancient aboleth or giant or even Kotoa, because the Kotoa, for instance, can create new gods that actually exist and can create new weird effects and things like that. A lot of it's tied into their Phasris energy as well, which was sort of placed there to give them extra vitality and boost the environment to help sustain them. But they really are masters of their terrain. Sacrifices have mostly got to do with Lolth and religion. The other gods in the pantheon of the Drow probably don't demand as much sacrifice as Lolth does. But also Lolth demands personal sacrifice in the form of pain and devotion and manipulation of others. So backstabbing and intrigue and keeping others under your thumb and making it really hard to advance and things like that. And that matriarchal society is really heavily influenced by Lolth as well. So yeah, I don't know if you can exactly put a number on it, but essentially if it amuses Lolth, she'll make things difficult to make the individuals stronger. Asmodeus's brother brought back. I didn't even know he had a brother. Oh yeah, he's got like a divine equivalent. No. It'd be really interesting if his brother was like a solar, and Asmodeus was trying to convince him to fall, and the solar was trying to convince Asmodeus to come back to the divine fold. There's already a god of storms, could other become a god of the rains? Yeah. So you have, the way it works with gods is one will be the major god that has primary control over all the portfolios that they're attached to. But other lesser gods can have those portfolios as well, but they kind of have to get divine approval from the bigger god in order for them to do anything. So they can't do something like, a lesser god can't do something like remove all rain from a region without the greater gods say so. So it doesn't matter how often you pray to the local deity, it's not going to get anything done unless the major deity approves of it. And when it comes down to wholesale manipulation of the planet, then it comes down to Ao's say so. So you could almost say that Ao is the god of the Torral sphere, the Torral solar system, Torrellian solar system. Well, not solar system. What's the name? I don't think the sun of Torral has its own name. It's interesting, actually. Humans shouldn't. If like aliens encountered humans out in the galaxy, we would be called Solarians, not Earthlings, because we'd been named after our star, which is Sol. That's where solar system gets its name from. Anyway, I digress. Getting a blue dragon to let you explore in its territory. Thanks, Morgan. Yeah. Like blue dragons, unlike silver dragons, they can't innately polymorph themselves into a smaller form. So they may actually get you to investigate ruins and stuff that they can't physically fit into. So that would definitely be something, and they would tax you heavily on the items that you bring out, particularly artwork. They would say, look, bring out any precious artwork that you find in there, and let me have a first pick of the gems and things like that. They might let you just walk off with all the platinum coins and things like that. Possibly. They are notoriously greedy, but they could actually do that. Why didn't humans conquest the Underdark, but the Drow did? Because the Drow had to, and the humans just can't handle living in dark environments for very long. They get vitamin deficiencies. Drow don't. That's one of the arguments I've had for like Drow skin pigmentation has nothing to do with where they live. It's not melanin that makes Drow dark, because they're not humans. Could a good or lawful paladin or cleric convert an evil sentient weapon or artifact? I'm going to have to say no on that one. No, because that soul is kind of locked into a magical construct. It's a different sort of thing. That's tricky. I often think of artifact intelligences as constantly refreshed, like a program that is reinstated every morning, sort of thing. It doesn't have the same weakness to madness that a human would have if they were locked into an inanimate object. Like, I could handle being locked in a coffee cup for approximately 2 seconds before I would go insane. Aob's god of a divinity. That's a good way of putting it. Adrianeth, I'd probably recommend human, because it really depends on what your DM's view is on tieflings and the reaction from people in the environment. Like, if you're a tiefling, you've already got the cards stacked against you because people's reaction is going to be... Tieflings have a reputation for doing evil shit, because they look infernal. and very weird and dangerous. Like they look dangerous. Like they've got sharp horns and claws and stuff like that, and fangs, and red eyes that glow, and things like that. So they look evil, from a classic sort of storybook point of view, and they just don't have a lot of contact with them, so they just don't know them personally, and they don't have familiarity with their culture or what they're about. So humans and other races tend to fear things they don't understand, or haven't had a lot of contact with. They're xenophobic by nature, and they live in a very dangerous world, so they have a different viewpoint on, and quite an intolerant viewpoint on, things that they don't understand. So they will tend to be very protective and reactive to anything they see as a dangerous act by a tiefling. So they've got the cards stacked against them just by the very nature of being a tiefling. Add in a religion that other people consider to be dangerous and hostile, then you've got a recipe for they are evil, they're the enemy, kill them or drive them out of the town. Essentially, as soon as they got wind of the fact that the tiefling was actually worshipping infernal powers, that's it. They're a devil as far as they're concerned. They don't know anything about planar boundaries and things like that. That person is a devil, as best the books have told them, or the things they've heard about. That's a devil. A human that does that, on the other hand, would probably be putting on a face of like legitimacy, and they would say, they might not have any understanding of a religion, of an infernal power like that. So, I'm saying, if you really want to have the odds stacked against your character, that's a good way of doing it. And of course, that character is going to be drawn into people who gravitate towards that character being able to do things off the books. So that's a bad guy because they look like a bad guy. So I'm going to approach them to do bad things. So they that character is going to get involved in shady shit because shady shit will just gravitate towards them. Oh yeah, you mean like the 4th edition, and early edition stuff of Asmodeus being a big serpent. Yeah, I've never been particularly fond of that. Because why would the Nine Hells have had previous rulers before Asmodeus if he was a massive serpent that was actually the base of the plane? It doesn't really make much sense from my point of view. Magic explains everything. Yeah. Thanks, Nico. Is there a Fey version of a tiefling Aasimar like touched and wear a good... Oh, yeah. So the Eladrin, for instance, are Fey touched Aasimar, you could say. They quite often cross the boundary, and there's what are they called? The Briani or something like that, or Brelani. I'm not entirely sure. So there's almost a divine crossover between the astral sea, the land of like a border between dreams, fairy tale, and actual divinity, and they cross over freely at a sort of a high frequency, and that's you have these Eladrin and stuff like that. They're these dreamlike creatures. Yeah, AO only has jurisdiction over realm space. He doesn't have jurisdiction over Greyhawk or Eberron or anything like that. They've never even heard of him. It's time for me to go, everybody. It's been an hour or so. Yeah, Tharizdun is very much outside of Asmodeus, outside of AO's rule. Tharizdun is a multi-planar, so multi-world entity. Same thing with Tiamat. Tiamat may be restricted by AO from interacting with Toril, which will probably get rid of Bahamut as well because he won't have his chief rival there to contend with. Or maybe he'll take over the Toril and turn it into an orderly realm under his control. But yeah. The door is always open to you making huge changes to the realms. Thanks, Josh. Thanks everybody for popping in and asking questions. Sorry to those of you whose questions I missed. You can always put your questions into the comments under this video, and I will answer them one by one after the fact. Quite happy to. And I will catch you next weekend. Sorry about the late stream this time, because I had family coming over and visiting. And I had a good time getting very drunk with my bro. All right. Catch you later, everybody.